Hey guys, welcome back. We are covering even more about Ecclesiastes today. If you've been keeping up with the series, we've just finished just over a month, maybe 2 months worth of going over all the background of Ecclesiastes, things that you need to know to understand how to read the book, some of the context to kind of understand who wrote it and some of the various characteristics of it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start actually walking our way through the book. Now, if you direct your attention over to the little sidebars that I've been putting together, I decided to include them in this playlist. You can choose to listen to them if you want to or not. I did them a little bit separately because they're a little outside the range of Ecclesiastes. But what I'm going to start to do in those sidebars is I am going to start to include a reading of the book of Ecclesiastes. So if you want to hear the book actually read through, I'm going to put that in there, and we'll see whether it's myself or someone else. But as you guys get into the book of Ecclesiastes, it is I trust you understand this by now. It is an amazing book. I cannot stress enough the importance of reading it and getting to know it. But the book of Ecclesiastes, as we've covered, can be viewed as a rather cynical book if you're not paying attention to what Solomon's trying to do. Solomon is approaching at the end of his life, and he's saying, look at all the things that I lived for. Be careful that you don't make my same mistakes. Now, one of the sidebars I'm going to include is a work that I did, and what it was called is Follow Your Guide, and I'll let that thing explain what that's all about. But with Follow Your Guide, it really is what Solomon is doing here. He's leaving us a journal and saying, guys, these are the mistakes I made. Here's how I lived. Here's what I lived for. This is what worked. This is what doesn't. And again, if you've ever moved into a new job area and you've talked with previous people who've worked that job, it is unbelievably beneficial to say what worked, what didn't, what should I try a different, whatever. And you work on that experience, and Solomon really is giving us this leg up to say, this is how you should live your life. These are the things that you need to understand. These are the things you need to know. And it would benefit us to do the same. And so as we get here into the exposition of Ecclesiastes, we're going to walk through the text. We're going to look at the various parts that you need to understand. And there are some of these passages that are going to be hard to understand. And so I'm going to do my best to explain them. It's not going to be comprehensive. We can't do that. There's just so much to do. And that's why the first half of this series was all dedicated to teaching you how to view it and how to discern it and how to decipher what he's trying to say, so that you can, on your own time and with your own research, you can go through this and you can study it on your own. So without further ado, let's get into the actual exposition of the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes, like I said, was written by Solomon toward the end of his life. And as we get into this, Solomon is going to spend a lot of time introducing himself. He's going to spend a lot of time introducing his experience. And basically what he's doing is he's laying out his resume and saying, this is why you should hire me. And what are we hiring him for? Well, in short, we are hiring Solomon to be our guide through life. And so at the end, Solomon's going to say things like, hey, my son, you might, not a might, by these words be admonished. And he's specifically talking about the words that are found in the book of Ecclesiastes. He says, much study is the weariness of the flesh, the making of books, there is no end, but pay attention to what's been written in this book. And so I just want you to pay attention to that as we go through. Solomon is laying out his qualifications. He's laying out who he was. And then he's going to start, as he goes through, he's going to start giving illustration after illustration after illustration to prove whatever point he's making in that section. And so there's going to be all sorts of just random points that he makes. But again, pay attention to the logic of that section, and then you'll see what he's trying to prove. There is some overarching themes, as we've already covered. But again, let's look at some of this exposition here of Ecclesiastes. First of all, the original name, Koheleth or Koheleth, that is what it means. It's the preacher, and he is the gatherer or dispenser of wisdom. That's what he does. So in Ecclesiastes 1:1, it says the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And so that's where we get the name Ecclesiastes, because the word Ecclesiastes is a translation in the Greek. That's where we get Ecclesiastes, and again, it's the idea of the preacher. So that's where we get these names. So what it is you are calling out an assembly, and you're having, if you imagine, a lecture to this assembly, and that's where we get this name. That's the motif that's being set up here. So Solomon is standing before a crowd, symbolically speaking, maybe literally speaking, and he is presenting his findings as the Koheleth to this crowd. And it seems specifically he's talking to a group of men, maybe he's even talking to his children, and he's just kind of laying it out and saying, these are the things that I've learned. Now, as we get into the book, the introduction here is going to start off by digging into this concept of the Hevel. If you don't know what that means, if you skip those lessons, go back, you'll look, you'll see some keys for understanding Ecclesiastes previously in this lesson. But he starts off in verse 2 and he says, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And so in this first phrase here in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, 1 through 3, we see this idea of the Hevel of Hevels. He's pronouncing a judgment and saying that everything is Hevel. If you're paying attention to the slideshow, you probably are noticing that there is a slight typo there. It's just what happens when you have a program and then the program won't let you edit it anymore. So he's pronouncing that everything is Hevel, and then he's going to transition and say, okay, since there's so much here that is empty and void and frustrating, so what are you benefited then? What's the profit that is? And so again, we're introducing, there's going to be a lot of, if you want to imagine this first chapter as the topic sentence of your research paper, that's what he's doing. He's getting into it and he's saying, all right, so I am speaking. You guys are going to hear me talk about Hevel a whole lot. You're going to hear me talk about profit a whole lot. And there we go. Now, when he talks about profit, it's pretty obvious what he means, but just in case you don't know, it's the idea of the gain, the surplus. It's what's left after you complete. And so if you were running a business and you had, $6,000 rent and you had $2,000 insurance and you had, $2,000 payroll. So, you've got $10,000 worth of expenses there and you bring in $12,000 that month. To someone who has no understanding of business, they're like, you made $12,000 that month? That's pretty good. And it's like, actually, I made $2,000. Maybe, because there are other bills that I might still have to pay. So that profit is really quite slim at the end of the day. And so some of these things where he's bringing it up, he's saying, all this work, all this labor, all this effort that I've put in, what do I have to show for it at the end of the day? What do I have as my take-home pay, so to speak? And so that's what this Yithrone is. It's this idea of profit. Again, it's going to get into the discussion of labor and work and all of these things. But what he's doing is he's looking at the bigger picture and saying, what profit is there? There's so much waste. There's so much cyclicality. Okay, so what? And that's where we get into the next part, which we'll get into next time, which is life is a giant cycle. So what's the point? Life's a giant cycle. You don't take anything extra home with you. It's like running a business where you have $10,000 in expense and $10,000 in money coming in, and you literally are it's just a wash. You don't get to take anything extra home. And that's how this is at the end of the day. And so Solomon is frustrated at this. He doesn't understand it. He's trying to make sense of it all. And this is where we're going to go next time as we continue exegeting the passage of Ecclesiastes. Now, guys, if I can ask you, if you've stuck with me this long, then I appreciate it. But I am going to ask you, if you can, you'll see a playlist pop up. If you can cycle through the rest of these videos, watch them, let other people know. But again, if you have a question, read ahead in the book of Ecclesiastes. If you have a question, put it in the comments. I would love to do a little sidebar, put a little note here, explain some of those passages for you. Even if it's a quick little video that I just kind of add to my little side notes. I want you guys to walk away from this study of Ecclesiastes with a thorough understanding of this book and how to properly apply it to your life. And so if that's helpful to you, please, like I said, leave a comment, like and subscribe to the channel. Keep up with all these updates. Again, I think our summer of Ecclesiastes is probably going to work its way into the fall, but we'll see how that plays out. And so thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you next time as we continue parsing through the book of Ecclesiastes and looking at the cyclicality of nature, which is the next phase. And look, We're 2 months in, and we've covered the first 4 verses, so we're making progress. I'll see you guys next time.